Associate Professor David Warton has made a series of highly significant contributions to data analysis in ecology, new methods for studying size variation, ecological communities, and their climatic response, and the spatial distribution of species. Associate Professor Warton's contributions have made substantial influence on statistical practice across disciplines, used in a very large number of articles in statistics, ecology, other areas of biology, the earth sciences, agriculture, medicine, chemistry, psychology, engineering, and physics. Professor Warton, congratulations, and I invite you to present your talk entitled Ecology, Statistics, and Rick Astley.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the Academy and to the Heyde family. This is a great honour. While I'm on a roll, I'd like to thank my mentors. One of them, Mark Westerby's here today, and my network of collaborators and students who are a pleasure to work with, and my family, who I love very much, and who give me the confidence to get up and say ridiculous things like this. What an exciting time it is to do statistics research. Statistics. Exciting. It's not a joke. So the left image there is what computers used to look like when I started high school. 64 kilobytes of RAM. So that digital image is over 100 kilobytes. So this poor computer doesn't have enough memory to look at a picture of itself. So these days, computers are thousands of times faster. You can get 1,000,000 times more memory. And that's just completely blown the field wide open, in my opinion. So I guess there's two main ways that technology is influencing data analysis. Firstly, it gives us all sorts of new types of data that we hadn't seen before, and hence new types of problems that we hadn't thought about before. Remote sensing, bioinformatics. Bioinformatics in particular has got a lot of people thinking about high dimensionality, which is a problem which there's been a lot of progress on over the last 10 years, and it's something that I've sort of tapped into a little bit in my work. So new technology gives us new data. It also gives us the capacity to develop all sorts of new analysis methods. There's been an explosion of different methods over the last couple of decades. This is just one example of something that we did with some CSIRO collaborators from Tasmania. We were classifying different species based on their environmental response, using methods that wouldn't have been an option 5 or 10 years ago. So something that I especially focus on in my work, this goes back to my PhD, is multivariate abundance data. This is really widely used by ecologists to study communities, to say something collectively about a whole bunch of species, whether it's invertebrates or plants or something else. In this particular example, a PhD student was driving all over southeastern Australia, 36 different sites, looking in grasslands at invertebrates, in particular hemiptera, bugs. He was looking at how these invertebrate communities respond to climate, hence how they might respond to climate change. There's something to notice. I guess there's two key things to notice, but I guess the data is set up in a matrix. We've got the sites in rows, we've got species in columns. And the first key property is that there's heaps of columns, there's heaps of species. And the second thing you can see just by looking at the data is that there's heaps of zeros. And the zeros induce what's called a mean variance relationship as you consider species with more and more abundance, so the bigger means, they get more variable at the same time. Now, this is not a hard thing to account for in analysis, but it's a really important thing to account for. The other main property of this type of data, that there's lots of variables, that's actually the more difficult of the two problems. And like I said, there's been a lot of research, a lot of progress in the last 10 or so years. But if you went to a statistician in the 80s with data like this, they probably would have told you to go away and come back when you've got a few less variables. There wasn't really a lot out there that people could do with this sort of data. And so ecologists quite rightly went away and made up their own methods. So there were some quite clever solutions out there, and considering the computational constraints of the time. And what they did was they used distances. They computed a metric which compared two sites, pairs of sites, across all these variables, and basically collapsed all these variables down into just a single variable. so they could use single variable analyses. It was a great idea at the time. It involved a few compromises, but it's ended up being really widely used, and it's still really widely used today. In fact, it's taught in many second-year ecology courses today. But I'd like to say that I think it should be put in the same category as Rick Astley, these methods. So Rick was huge between August 87 and about February 1988. Not so much these days. And if you were caught dancing to Rick Astley, it'd be an embarrassment. In much the same way, if you're caught dancing with your data using these methods, you should reconsider what you're doing. Here are a few reasons why. So the mean variance relationship is not explicitly modelled by these methods, which gives all sorts of problems in terms of efficiency, all sorts of undesirable efficiency properties. So here, high power is good, and for most species, the methods people are using have almost no power until they get up to the end to these species that have high variance, and then they start doing their job. So there's supposed to be methods which are saying something about the community, taking into account what's happening in all the different species. What they actually do is ignore most of the species and focus on a few high variance species. It's not a good thing to do. So a second key problem with these methods is that they're not based on any underlying model, and a lot of questions ecologists are interested in imply a model. So, for example, composition. People often want to compare composition in different places. If there's no difference in composition, then your relative abundances are the same. Your abundances are proportional across the two sites. That implies a mean structuring, which you can't make a lot of sense of without a model. And so people are ending up in this situation where they're applying methods to look for differences in composition, which in some cases are 100% guaranteed to give you the wrong answer. So there's all sorts of other things that we could be doing. These are a few examples of things that my group's been working on. There are now, increasingly, there's more people around the world looking at this problem and thinking about other ways to approach it. And it works. So the problems we had before, we can come up with solutions that resolve most of these problems. So we're sort of tracking along the dotted lines where we're supposed to be. And so we have a way forward. But that's not the end of the story, because the next challenge is actually communicating this to ecologists. Because remember, these methods that they've been using are really entrenched in the literature. They're often taught at the undergraduate level. And so we've got to try and basically tell a whole discipline that, to change the way they're doing multivariate analysis. It's a big job. And there's a lot of different approaches that we are trying and that we have been doing. Patience is probably the biggest thing I'm going to need. But one thing I would like to highlight is that just as the technology for doing science has been changing, the technology for science communication is changing. So I made a YouTube video which has been viewed by more people than I'd say would have seen any talk all the talks that I've given in my career. I would have talked to 3,000 or so people. This is getting up towards 4,000 views of a video that just took a couple of days to make. So there's a lot of power in modern methods of data analysis, and there's also a lot of power in modern methods of science communication as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And are there any questions or comments to David? Ecology questions, statistics questions? Go ahead, Tony.
Rick Astley. Who is Rick Astley?
Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and hurt you. The thing is, I actually promised a number of people before this talk that I wasn't going to dance. They didn't mention singing.
Okay, go ahead, Oliver.
Did I see CCA as one of the methods that doesn't work? Is that because it's being inappropriately used in that place? Because it does work where it was meant to be used.
So that's a good question. Canonical correspondence analysis is kind of a grey area between it was trying to do models, but doing a lot of shortcuts to try and fit those models. It would make sense if your data was Poisson, so it's making decisions in the way it scales variables that would make sense if your data didn't have over-dispersion, if you had mean variance relationships which were straight lines. The one I've got here, and most mean variances relationships you see aren't straight lines, they've got a bit of a curve to them, which means that it's again giving undue attention to the most variable, the high abundant species. So if the method was used only for data which wasn't over dispersed, then I'd expect it to do pretty well. But yeah, that's a very limited sort of set of data that doesn't capture what most people are doing.
Terry.
Terry Speed, same place as I was last time I spoke, the Hall Institute. I enjoyed your talk very much, and I take on board the message that ecologists have to maybe change their ways. But I feel for redressing a historical imbalance, I was around in the 60s and 70s when we were studiously ignoring these, we statisticians were studiously ignoring these problems. And actually there was a very active group in Canberra in this field, developing clustering methods and other things that you've alluded to, that you're saying now should be tossed into the dustbin of history. But we're culpable too, we statisticians.
That's right.
It wasn't just a matter of the data are too big. We did not embrace these problems, we didn't attack them, so we've got a lot of shared blame here.
Yes, that's right. And I think the people that have been developing these methods shouldn't be blamed either, because they were actually making very significant advances at the time. I guess the point is that we're in a different time now.
Okay, on that note, could you please join me to thank Professor Warton?